So what is going on, everyone? Fernando Silva here with another video, and today we have an interesting one because I was going through Twitter and I was having a conversation with Patrick Tomaso, I hope I'm saying his last name correctly, and we were talking about what's a better value. This new iPad mini at 256 gigabytes, which will cost you $650, or to go out and find yourself a refurbished 11-inch iPad Pro. And the consensus is that usually that 11-inch iPad Pro, whether it's a 2018 or a 2020 version, is going to be a better overall value unless you really need this size and form factor of the iPad mini 6. So in this video, we're going to go over all the different specs, see exactly which one is the better value, which one is better for your money, is it worth it to go refurbished and things like that, because I know that this is a 2021 iPad, but an iPad from 2018 could give it a run for its money. But let's get into it. So another big reason why I wanted to make this comparison video is because I was going through the Apple refurbished site, which I want to say like once a week, and I usually go on there just to kind of see what deals they have going on, because most of the time I'm not really looking to get anything. But I saw that they do have some 2020 refurbished 11-inch iPad Pros, and the cheapest one, so you get 128 gigabyte 11-inch iPad Pro from 2020 is costing you $609, right? Versus this new iPad mini with the 256 gigabyte model is costing you $650. So this new iPad mini is more expensive than an iPad Pro from the refurbished section. And if you're lucky enough to find a 2018 model like I have right here, this is the 11-inch 2018 iPad Pro. If you're lucky enough to find one of those with a 64 gigabyte model, it might be even like $520, $519, something along those lines if you're lucky enough to find one in the refurbished section. So what I want to do is actually lay out all the information from both of these iPads, because they are a little bit different in terms of size, spec, internally, the hardware, all that good stuff. But I want to go back to 2018 and figure out what made this 11-inch iPad a pro-level iPad, right? What were the things that Apple came out with which really changed the game? So the first thing they added was this Face ID. So they got rid of Touch ID for the iPad Pro and they replaced it with Face ID, which for me, it's my favorite way of biometrically getting into a device, right? It's amazing on the iPhones, it's amazing on the iPad Pros. And then Touch ID, I did enjoy it. I liked it on the iPhones back in the day because it just felt normal and it worked well. But now they have the Touch ID sensor in the lock button of these iPad minis and the iPad Airs, and for me personally, I'm not a big fan of them just because I accidentally click down on the unlock button a lot, which in turn locks the device even though you're trying to get into it. So I end up trying to unlock it multiple times until I'm finally in there, and then you also have to like rest it, so it takes a second for it to actually get you in there, which is something that I just haven't been enjoying that process. So what else made this iPad an iPad Pro, right? So we had the Face ID, they did change up the bezels and they redid the entire hardware of that iPad compared to the one before, but we're not going to touch on that too much just because this form factor and this iPad has kind of the same design language. So from an industrial design and feel, they feel the same. If you're not looking at size, they feel exactly the same. There's no like less quality of hardware on this iPad mini versus the iPad Pro. But another big thing that made the iPad Pro a pro level iPad was that ProMotion, so that 120 hertz display, which is the first time Apple brought a 120 hertz display to any Apple device. And that was back in 2018, where Apple wasn't even thinking about doing anything like that, or at least none of the Apple sheet thought that Apple would bring that to any of their devices because they felt that there wasn't a need for it yet. But ProMotion is pretty revolutionary, and for me personally, it's not a crazy game changer. You definitely notice it, especially if you have them side by side, and I'll have some B-roll showing it, but 120 hertz and ProMotion is, again, it's a nice pro level type of added and feature that should be on any pro level device. And finally, it took almost 4 years for Apple to bring that same ProMotion or that same level of 120 hertz to the iPhone Pro models. We now have the 120 hertz ProMotion display and that liquid retina display that Apple was touting, and honestly, it's a great display. Even a 2018 display is still amazing in 2021 going into 2022. Like, yes, I have a mini LED display with the M1 iPad Pro and things like that, but it's really, yeah, it's a little bit better. You do see something that's better, but is it really worth that much more? I don't know. Like, you really will not tell the difference with a liquid retina versus a mini LED unless, again, you hold them side by side. But then another thing that they brought over was USB-C. So this was the first iPad that actually had a USB-C, which made it a Pro model. It allowed us to have some more peripherals, right, some more accessories to use, some SD card readers, USB-C hubs, being able to connect to an external display, having a 15-in-1 USB-C hub to be able to do everything that you wanted. Those are all things that were not possible with the Lightning cable because honestly, Lightning is terrible and Apple needs to really get rid of it. And I'm so tired of having Lightning and having the only thing that I need to charge be my iPhone. And then lastly, what made this thing an actual pro device was just the overall raw power and speed, right? They introduced the A12X chip, which was super quick, super fast, snappy, and to this day it still is. 4 years later, this chip is still very snappy, zero issues with it. It runs every single application that you could run on a 2021 M1 iPad Pro that's fully loaded. Yes, it doesn't have a ton of RAM. I think it only has 4 gigs of RAM or something like that, and the RAM management could be a little bit better, but overall, if you're okay with that, like, this is still a very big pro level device, and those are the main things that made this a pro iPad back in 2018. So now let's compare those specs to this little iPad mini. And then one more thing that I did want to mention is that this iPad mini does not have pin connectors, which means we're probably not going to get any first-party keyboard accessories directly from Apple, versus with the 11-inch iPad Pro. Even the 9th generation regular iPad has their own form of pin connectors, even though they're a little bit more outdated and work with like the origami style keyboard, at least it has pin connectors. And then the 11-inch iPad Pro works with the Magic Keyboard, works with the Slim Folio keyboard case, and has other accessories you can use with those pin connectors, versus the iPad mini, you're gonna have to rely on Bluetooth and pretty much Bluetooth only. So now let's run through the specs of this tiny little iPad mini, right? So from a spec perspective, because we all know the hardware already, 8.3-inch display, kind of just like a shrunken down iPad Air 4, pretty much what it is from a hardware standpoint, right? It's very pretty to look at, nice to hold in the hand, very portable and things like that. But from a hardware perspective, you now have the new A15 Bionic instead of that A12X Bionic that they have in the iPad 2018 or the iPad Pro. So you do get, I guess technically 3 generations newer of a chipset. But again, I'm gonna run the Geekbench scores, and you guys might be surprised of what these Geekbench scores represent, because again, I think the A12X has a little bit more from a GPU standpoint and a multi-core standpoint still, versus the A15 Bionic is very good at single core use, right? It still will be able to handle some GPU, some multi-core stuff, but it's not built 100% for that, even though it will run it pretty seamlessly, in all honesty. And then in terms of the display, we also have the Liquid Retina display, but this time it's only 60 Hz instead of that 120 Hz ProMotion. So again, you're not really gonna notice the difference unless you have the iPad side by side. And even then, the difference isn't that crazy where I'm gonna be like, hey, if you don't get 120 Hz, your life is gonna be terrible using the iPad. Like, you still get a great experience with 60 Hz display versus 120 Hz display, because again, think about it, up until this year, and even this year, the regular iPhone 13 and 13 mini, they still have 60 Hz displays, right? Because Apple's so good with those 60 Hz displays, and also their touch sample rate is I think 120 Hz. So it's basically like how you touch it and how the screen interacts with your finger, that the touch sample rate is still 120 Hz on the 60 Hz displays. But again, it took Apple a long time to put 120 Hz on the iPhones because they figured that most people wouldn't really notice it, in my opinion. And a lot of people aren't going to go out and get the newest one just for the 120 Hz display, unless you're like MKBHD that loves all things 120 Hz. And then again, this also did bring a USB-C port, so they got rid of the lightning cable from the old iPad minis and they brought over a USB-C port, which again is very welcome. It adds, again, those peripherals that we keep talking about and things like that. So honestly, at this point, these things are so similar from a spec standpoint. So on one side you have the A12X Bionic, and on the other side you have the A15 Bionic, then you have 120 Hz on the iPad Pro, 60 Hz on the iPad mini. Both of them have USB-C. The iPad mini does have center stage, so that new 120 viewing angle, which is something that the 11-inch iPad Pro does not have. So if you're really into center stage, then that's something that you would probably take advantage of on the iPad mini that the iPad Pro doesn't have. But that's pretty much it when it comes to actual specs that you need to think about when purchasing this. Because at the end of the day, in my opinion, it's just a matter of size. Like, what do you prefer? Do you need an 11-inch iPad Pro that does a little bit more work for you? Or do you want an iPad mini as a kind of leisure tablet that can be thrown around but can also get some work done when you need it to? That's pretty much what it is. Like, this iPad Pro is for somebody that wants their iPad to be their computer. This iPad mini is for somebody that wants to supplement their computer or supplement their current workflow, or just have a tablet laying around that's easy and portable and easy to move around. But again, the 11-inch iPad Pro is still pretty portable. Yes, I can't grab it with one hand. I gotta cup it like I mentioned in my last video. But again, it's still pretty portable. It's still not as tedious as the 12.9-inch iPad Pro, which is to my left over there. So again, in my opinion, it literally just comes down to what size do you prefer? Right? Because they're both pretty future-proof. Even though this one is about 3-4 years old, you're still going to get updates for another 3, 4, maybe 5 years. Think about it. The 2015 iPad Pro just got iPadOS 15. That is a 6-year-old device, almost 7-year-old device with I think it has an A10 chip in there, and it's still running iPadOS 15. So this one, these Pro models will get updates probably to like iPadOS 18 or 19, and this one you might get to like iPadOS 20. So you might get a little bit more longevity with this one, but not much more in my opinion, because these things are meant to last for a very, very long time. So for me personally, if I had to choose one single one out of these, I'm going refurbished with the iPad Pro 11-inch, just because I like to use my iPad Pro as my computer, but this is for the people that don't use their iPads as a computer, that want to use an iPad as a tablet only, and they want to use it on the go, and they want to put it in a bag, put it in a purse, put it in their pocket even. Use it as a supplemental device to their iPhone, and use it as a supplemental device to their MacBook Air and things like that. So overall, for me personally, I'm taking the $610 2020 iPad Pro 11-inch versus a $650 iPad mini, but that's just my 2 cents. I just want to lay down everything out in front of you in terms of the spec sheet and give you guys my opinion. Both are great devices, both can do a lot of the same things. It pretty much comes down to the chipset, the storage size, the physical size, and then the screen technology. But that's going to do it for this video. Hopefully you guys learned something new. Hopefully you guys got some insight as to what I would pick, because like I said, both of them are amazing devices. I'd be happy to have either of them, but if I were to choose one of them, I'm going with the Pro. And that's the situation for most people. Most people don't have a 12.9, an 11, a 10.5 inch, an iPad mini, a regular iPad 9th generation. Most people don't have that many iPads. Most people have one iPad and they stick with that iPad for like 3 to 5 years, unless you're like in that game, in this tech YouTube game where you need to get all the latest and greatest, because again, these things last for a very, very, very long time. But that's gonna do for this video. Hopefully you guys enjoyed. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, check out channel sponsor Paperlike. Leave a comment below. Which one would you choose? Would you choose a refurbished 2018 or refurbished 2020? Or would you just go with a brand new iPad mini just because you want to try out the form factor, try something new, because it does feel like a new device. That is one thing that I will give the mini. It feels like a new device because of the new form factor, the new size, the kind of weird place that it fits into that ecosystem, versus the 11-inch iPad Pro has been around for almost 4 years, so it doesn't feel like a new device. Just like this 12.9-inch M1 iPad Pro did not feel like a new device to me coming from the 2018 iPad Pro, just because it was the same thing, and I could do pretty much everything from the 2018 iPad Pro that I could on the 2021. So I'll leave you guys with that. That is my 2 cents, but don't forget to like, comment, subscribe. Until next time, leave a comment below. Which one are we going with? Peace.